The sun, a relentless tyrant, beat down on the cracked earth of the Kenyan savanna. It was the peak of the dry season, and the landscape, usually a tapestry of vibrant greens and yellows, was now a dusty, brittle expanse. Juma, a young ranger with a soul as vast as the wilderness he protected, scanned the horizon from his Land Rover. His heart ached for the animals, the gaunt giraffes, the listless wildebeest, the struggling herds of zebra. This drought was more than a season. It was a slow, suffocating siege. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught his eye near a cluster of acacia trees. It wasn't the fluid grace of a healthy animal. It was a stumble, a collapse. Juma pulled the vehicle to a stop, his boots kicking up dust as he approached. Lying in the ochre soil was a zebra foal, no more than a few months old, separated from its herd. Its breathing was shallow, its eyes glazed over with dehydration. A gash on its hind leg, likely from a snare or a hungry scavenger, was caked with dirt. "Poor little one," Juma whispered, his voice a low rumble. He knew the unwritten rule of the bush. Let nature take its course. Intervention was a slippery slope, often leading to more harm than good. But looking into the foal's desperate, pleading eyes, he couldn't turn away. This wasn't a matter of life or death. It was a choice to fight for a flicker of hope. Gently, with a practiced hand, he covered its eyes to minimize the fear, and with a strength born of pure resolve, he lifted the fragile creature into the back of his vehicle. Back at the ranger station, his mentor, Samuel, a man whose face was a roadmap of sun-creased wrinkles and hard-won wisdom, watched Juma unload the foal. "Juma," Samuel said, his voice quiet but firm, "you know the risks. A hand-raised zebra can never truly be wild again. And the time, the resources, they are precious in a time like this." "I know, Samuel," Juma replied, his gaze fixed on the shivering foal. "But it's not a choice I could make. It's too young to die like this. I'll call it Chui because it's a fighter. It deserves a chance." Samuel shook his head slowly, a mixture of disapproval and grudging respect in his eyes. He saw the fire in Juma, the same fire that had made him the best ranger in the park, but also the same stubbornness that could lead to heartbreak. As Juma began the painstaking work of stabilizing Chui, he knew this was more than just a rescue. It was a personal test, a battle against nature's cruelty and the weight of his own conscience. This is a fictional story dramatized for entertainment purposes. If you are enjoying this, please like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. The following days became a blur of frantic care. Chui, the little zebra with the fighting spirit, was a difficult patient. It refused the bottle, panicked at Juma's touch, and its wound, despite Juma's careful cleaning, seemed to heal too slowly. Juma's exhaustion was a constant presence, a heavy cloak he wore from sunrise to sunset. He called Dr. Usher, a pragmatic and brilliant veterinarian from a nearby town, to help. She arrived in a cloud of dust, a no-nonsense woman with a calming presence. "You're a good man, Juma," she said, kneeling to examine the foal. "But you're trying to win a fight that nature has already decided." She administered an antibiotic and gave Juma strict instructions on a special nutrient paste. "Trust is the key. You have to be its mother, its herd. Be patient." Juma took her words to heart. He spent hours just sitting in the enclosure, speaking to Chui in soft tones, reading from an old, tattered book, his very presence a quiet source of comfort. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the foal began to change. It started drinking from the bottle, its movements became less frantic, and it would rest its head against Juma's leg as he sat nearby. The bond, fragile at first, began to solidify, a silent understanding forged in shared solitude. The community, however, had its doubts. The elders, meeting under a baobab tree, spoke of the drought as a punishment for disrespecting the natural order. Some saw Juma's actions as a beautiful testament to humanity's kindness, while others saw it as a dangerous and futile interference. Juma bore their judgment with a quiet resolve, his focus solely on the little zebra's slow recovery. The rains still hadn't come, and the tension in the air was as thick as the dust. Every day was a fight for water, for food, and for the life of a zebra that had become a symbol of his hope. With Dr. Asha's help and Juma's tireless dedication, Chui's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. The foal's stripes shone with health, its movements were strong and confident, and a playful mischievousness had replaced its fear. Juma knew the time was approaching to release Chui back into a safer, more secluded part of the conservancy, but a sense of unease settled in his stomach. The drought had changed the behavior of every creature in the park. On a patrol with Samuel, they received a disturbing report. A giant rock python, displaced by the lack of rain and desperate for a substantial meal, had been spotted near the northern watering holes. Pythons were a natural part of the ecosystem, but a creature of that size was a serious threat, especially to a young animal. As they drove back, Juma's heart pounded with a premonition of dread. He rushed to the intermediate enclosure he had prepared for Chui, but the gate, which he was certain he had secured, was ajar. A single set of zebra hoofprints led out into the bush. "Oh no," Juma whispered, his blood turning to ice. "No, no, no." Samuel's face was grim. "Don't jump to conclusions, Juma. It could be anywhere. We'll find it." But the tracks led directly towards the area where the python had been sighted. The landscape, a maze of tall, dry grasses and hidden gullies, was a predator's perfect hunting ground. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, menacing shadows across the savanna, Juma and Samuel found the tracks suddenly stop at the edge of a dense thicket. In the eerie silence, broken only by the distant call of a jackal, they heard a rustling sound, a low, rhythmic hiss that sent shivers down Juma's spine. Chui was in there, and the giant python was close. The very thing he had fought so hard to save was now moments away from becoming a meal. Remember, this is a fictional story. The dedication of Juma is what makes this tale so compelling. If you are invested in Chui's fate, consider subscribing to the channel to see what happens next. The moment was frozen in time. Juma, Samuel, and Dr. Asha, who had been called in a frantic panic, stood on the edge of the thicket. Peering through the dense foliage, they saw Chui, trembling with terror, its back pressed against a gnarled tree. A monstrous rock python, its scales shimmering in the fading light, was coiled menacingly, its head raised, preparing to strike. The air was thick with the scent of fear and the promise of death. "We have to do something," Juma hissed, grabbing a thick branch. "Wait," Samuel said, his eyes scanning the surrounding area. "Listen." A deep, resonant growl rumbled through the air. From the right, a pride of lions emerged from the tall grass, their golden manes and powerful forms a stark contrast to the desolate landscape. Juma's breath caught in his throat. This was it. The zebra was doomed, caught between two apex predators. He braced himself for the horrific sight to come, but the lions didn't look at Chui. Their focus was entirely on the python. The dominant male, a formidable beast with a scarred face, let out a terrifying roar. The drought had created a desperate competition for food, and a massive python was a rival and a potential prize not to be ignored. With a roar, the lion lunged, followed by the rest of the pride. The battle was a whirlwind of motion, a primal clash between scales and claws. The python struck back, a blur of muscle and venomous intent, but the lions were too many, too coordinated, and too hungry. "Now!" Samuel yelled. While the lions engaged the python in a ferocious fight, Juma, Samuel, and Dr. Asha raced forward. They managed to get between the commotion and the terrified foal. Juma, using all his built-up trust, took Chui by the mane and with a mix of gentle whispers and firm guidance, led the zebra away from the chaos and towards the safety of the Land Rover. They escaped, just as the pride finally overwhelmed the giant snake, its victory a grim reminder of the brutal rules of the savanna. Back at the station, Chui was safe, but the events of the evening had taken a toll. Juma sat beside the foal, his heart still pounding, the taste of fear still fresh on his tongue. The experience had been a visceral lesson. It wasn't his love or his care that had saved Chui, but the brutal, unpredictable forces of nature itself. He saw now that he couldn't protect the zebra forever. He had to let go. The rains, as if a final act of grace, came that night. A soft, steady drizzle at first, then a full cleansing downpour. The parched earth drank greedily, and the air filled with the sweet, earthy scent of renewal. The drought was over. A few weeks later, with the savanna now a lush sea of green, Juma and Samuel drove Chui to a remote, protected area of the park where a small, stable herd of zebras had been reintroduced. They were healthy, strong, and unafraid. As they opened the gate, Chui looked at Juma one last time, a silent goodbye. Then with a hesitant step, it trotted towards the herd. A mare turned to meet it, nudging Chui gently. The foal was home. Juma watched the scene with a bittersweet smile, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on his cheek. He had saved a life, but he had also learned a profound truth. His role was to protect, not to possess. Standing side by side with Samuel and Dr. Asher, a new sense of peace settled over him. The experience had taught him that the true strength of a man and of nature itself lies not in control, but in connection, community, and the courage to let go. The savanna was once again a place of life, of hope, and of wild, untamable beauty.